In the shadows of a world gripped by manipulation, war, and the slow erosion of sovereignty, something unexpected is unfolding deep within the heart of Africa, away from the flashing cameras and the staged smiles of global summits. A quiet storm is gathering strength. It was a night without fanfare, without the echo of applause or the blinding glare of media. But in a hidden location, somewhere across the Sahel, 3 men sat around a wooden table. No titles, no entourages, no translators, only trust, conviction, and one shared goal: liberation. These men, each a revolutionary in his own right, had grown tired of their countries being treated as pawns in someone else's game. Ibrahim Traoré of Burkina Faso, Assimi Goïta of Mali, and Abdourahamane Tiani of Niger, 3 military leaders, once viewed as mere transitional heads, were now becoming the architects of a seismic change that threatens the foundation of Western influence in Africa. Their meeting wasn't supposed to happen not like this, not with this much intensity. Intelligence agencies in Europe and Washington had only caught whispers, a leaked flight manifest, a communication blackout in the region, but they were too late. The alliance had already begun to take shape, and it wasn't just about defense, nor just about nationalism. It was about rewriting Africa's future by Africans, for Africans. The room was dimly lit, not for secrecy, but for symbolism. The flickering candlelight reflected the state of their nations, battered, unstable, but far from extinguished. Traoré, the youngest of the trio and perhaps the boldest, leaned forward first. He spoke of betrayal not by enemies, but by those once called allies, of how his people dug gold from the earth while children starved, of how foreign corporations harvested wealth while Burkina Faso bled. Goïta nodded, his eyes filled with the memory of soldiers lost not to war, but to manipulation. He spoke of the silence from international institutions. When Mali was under siege by insurgents armed with foreign weapons, he spoke of the hypocrisy democracy preached, but never practiced. Human rights shouted, but never applied to African lives. And Tiani, though newer to the spotlight, was no less resolute. He had seen what happened to leaders who defied the status quo, the coups, the sanctions, the sudden crashes of economies, the media campaigns painting them as tyrants. But he also saw what happened when a nation stood alone, vulnerable, surrounded, sabotaged. And that's why this meeting mattered. It wasn't just about cooperation, it was about survival. The plan was audacious, a trilateral defense pact, shared intelligence, unified borders, a collective withdrawal from foreign military operations, the creation of a regional currency independent from the CFA franc, a new economic bloc based not on extraction but on development. For decades, the West had thrived on division. When African nations sought help, they were offered debt. When they demanded peace, they were handed weapons. When they resisted, they were punished. But now, the game was changing. The alliance between Burkina Faso, Mali, and Niger wasn't built on convenience, it was built on scars, and the lessons those scars taught. For too long, Africa's greatest wealth, its minerals, its oil, its land had been a curse. Now, these leaders vowed to make it a blessing. As the hours passed, details were hammered out. Joint military exercises, the removal of French military presence, the expulsion of certain NGOs suspected of subversion, the formation of local defense militias trained by African veterans, not foreign mercenaries. They spoke of rebuilding education systems that didn't worship Europe, of investing in agriculture, not in ports, of preserving culture, not apologizing for it. Outside, thunder rolled in the distance. A storm was coming, and they welcomed it. The West wasn't blind. They saw what was happening. Sanctions followed. Aid was cut. Media outlets called it a regression into dictatorship. but on the streets of Ouagadougou, Bamako, and Niamey. Crowds gathered not to protest, but to celebrate. Young men waved national flags. Women sang liberation songs that hadn't been heard in decades. Elders wept, not out of fear, but out of long-awaited pride. In response, France withdrew troops. The European Union issued stern statements. The United States held emergency meetings, but none of it stopped the wave that had begun. What these 3 men had triggered wasn't just regional, it was continental. Leaders in Guinea, Chad, and even parts of Sudan began to speak more boldly. Activists once suppressed found their voices amplified. For the first time in a generation, the dream of Pan-Africanism had found new TORCHBEA or ERS. Of course, it wasn't perfect. Challenges came fast. Currency inflation, supply chain disruptions, diplomatic isolation. But the people endured because for the first time, the pain felt like it had a purpose. It wasn't exploitation anymore, it was birth pains. Every revolution has its doubters, and this one was no different. Western analysts predicted failure. Some even banked on it. They said the alliance would crumble under pressure, that military men couldn't build nations. But they misunderstood something vital. These were not military men chasing power. They were soldiers who had buried too many friends, seen too much foreign betrayal, and decided enough was enough. Traoré once told his people, "We'd rather die standing than live on our knees." That statement, once dismissed as populist rhetoric, had now become a regional anthem. Across Africa, murals of the 3 leaders appeared. Children learned their names alongside the likes of Lumumba, Sankara, and Nkrumah, but they didn't want to be worshipped. They wanted to be remembered only if they succeeded, only if their people finally saw what it meant to be truly free. And in the West, unease turned into alarm. Oil contracts were questioned, uranium deals threatened, mining rights revoked. Where once African leaders signed away national resources in 5-star hotels, now they were tearing up agreements in military barracks. Western media intensified its campaign. Dictators, they shouted, destabilizers. But few in Africa were listening anymore. They'd heard those words before, used against Gaddafi, used against Sankara, used against any African who stood tall. In that secret meeting, one of the leaders had said quietly, "If we succeed, they will come for us, not just with bullets, but with stories, with money, with divide and conquer." And he was right. Assassination plots were uncovered, internal agents were exposed, but the alliance held, because it wasn't built on a person, it was built on pain and the will to